pulling this line that's been on the Old Forester bottle since George Garvin Brown himself wrote it down.
What I love about it is that it's applicable, of course, to our product, but it's applicable to everything we do.
I want to have the best culture in the industry that allows people to thrive and be their best selves and perform at the top of their game.
If it's really going to be nothing better, then you have to declare it, you have to own it, and you have to name it and claim it. And that's what we're doing.
So welcome one and all. Thank you so much for being part of our virtual seminar regarding the value of innovation, iteration, and transformation within the bar industry for bartenders, for bars and entrepreneurs in the spirited field. I'm beyond grateful and honored to host this wonderful session together with a wonderful group of people whom I treasure and admire an awful lot. I have with me today, AK Alexis and Iain, and thank you so much everybody for tuning in. And I would love to start by introducing all the panelists and all the people that are on this seminar together with me. So AK, would you like to start right away and give us a brief introduction into yourself and what it is that you do?
For sure, thank you. Also very excited to be here. My name is AK Hada. I'm here from New York, and I'm the general manager at Existing Conditions, which we just opened back up, so I can officially say that now.
Alexis, thank you so much for being part of our panel today. Please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. Alexis Belton, Tinoco. I have two last names. I am coming to you from Chicago. It's nice to see all of you. I work at the Aviary. I've been there for a little over 6.5 years, and currently job title is bar director for the bar. And thanks for having me.
Iain joining us from up north in Scotland. How are you, my man?
Good, thanks. Yes, hi everyone. My name's Iain McPherson, tuning in from Edinburgh, Scotland. Proud owner of 3 bars, Panda and Sons, which I guess most known for globally, Hoot the Redeemer, and Nauticus, and also recently created a technique called switching.
My name is Reinhard Pohorec. I'm host at Boutique Bar 27 here in Vienna. Besides, I work as an experience designer and a sensory expert with a particular love for spirits, wines, and everything in the liquid field. It means a lot to me to be on this panel together with all of you, because 3 of you have clearly been thought leaders, innovators in your respective field. And let's be honest, innovation, iteration, and disruption are words that get thrown around an awful lot. And we all like to consider ourselves opinion leaders, thought leaders, and innovators. But I would love to start right away and ask all of you, how do you actually define innovation for yourself and also for your business?
Well, I'll kick it off. I mean, to me, it was great when we discussed this earlier, because I feel like the 3 of us all work in very different venues, but we all have very similar views on what innovation is. And for me, the kind of short quip that I kept coming back to is that innovation to me is not just something new, but something that evokes change or that meets a need. So if there's a need, whether it be technique in service, in concept of bar, you know, all of those things kind of fall under that category of is it just new or is it innovative, and can it be applied and taken from?
I'll jump in next, kind of piggybacking off of what AK said. I think we work in very similar venues that really value, I think, scientific approaches to menu items. And I think we can all say that innovation is probably, defined individually very differently. And for me, I kind of see it a little bit more as taking something that we already know and possibly helping it evolve or change to either suit the needs of our bar or to become something that we can do a little bit faster or a little bit more consistently. And to be completely transparent, I was never really the R&D person at the aviary. I kind of helped operate the bar, and the person that was in charge of the R&D really kind of took me under their wing and helped me kind of see that innovation is very broad reaching, and then a lot of times it is kind of disrupting things that we already know and helping it evolve and change to become better.
Yeah, so defining innovations is, I guess, very hard, and I really enjoyed our discussion we had last week. For me, I guess, trying to summarize it, it could be creating something new, or it could be evolving something existing. And, I think some people, when they hear about innovation, especially with Tales of the Cocktail, they think necessarily has to be about cocktails. But, innovation touches on all aspects, be it, your business models, the way your bar's laid out, cocktail techniques, cocktails, cocktail menus. So it's such a wide, diverse phrase that touches so many great aspects of what a great cocktail bar or a great bartender is. So for me, innovation is kind of either creating something new or evolving an existing thing, but with a little sprinkle of evolution involved in it as well.
I love the fact that you all three clearly have different views on what innovation means to you and also to your business, especially the fact that anticipating needs as a quintessential element of that, but also solving actual problems, I think, is a key element here. And let's face it, we live in probably the most challenging times right now, and we're all trying to get acquainted to a new normal, as we all call it. What do you think does innovation mean right now with all the things that are going on in this moment in time?
I think one of the things that Iain just said, that everyone is sort of facing right now is business model, sort of that concept and identity of how we used to run our bars before everyone's respective COVID quarantines. Now all of a sudden is changing, and the way that our guests feel have changed and their lifestyles have changed. So there's a whole new set of needs that we are all of a sudden having to cater to, whether it's, to-go cocktails, which is interesting. I think it's kind of a Band-Aid, but it's also very necessary right now, and it still helps to spread, just the word that you're still open and you're in business, how to still make people feel cared for if you can't get within a close distance to them. All those sort of things requires now new innovation. In addition, many of the protests going on there, I think they're so important because I think that there were so many needs that were already there that maybe we just weren't paying attention to enough as bar owners. And so that's also an important aspect of our current events that needs to be addressed.
Yeah, okay, I guess I'll chime in. I guess in this current climate, innovation, the majority of my innovation, I guess, has been survival, adapting business models, and, touching on, AK's, the wider community is, innovating and evolving equality and diversity, even more so now in our industry, which is a good thing. I think, we're riding a good journey with this movement of many things going on right now. But for me, as AK said, we're trying to innovate the way we do our business models. So, for example, we created a company or business called the Edinburgh Booze Delivery, which was really trying to bring the community together, because I think right now that we all have this kind of common enemy, be it the financial crisis around the world and, COVID. everywhere. So, for me, it was about bringing people together. I've always looked after our staff in terms of welfare. That's been really a massive part of our business models. But now that they're safe with, furlough pay, as we call it here in the UK, I want to look at the wider picture in Edinburgh. So we developed this business model where we had a platform to bring local bars, local breweries, and local distilleries onto one platform, so we could all bring our individual audiences onto one platform to create basically a larger audience for all of us. And yeah, so that's been really challenging. But I guess in terms of what's happening now is kind of my main focus in innovation.
It's funny that Iain mentioned the word challenging, because I think a lot of times innovation it's meant to be challenging, whether it challenges you as an individual or the business as a whole. And yes, the business model is definitely something that's changing right now. And, AK mentioned cocktails to go items. And it's funny to think about bars and restaurants like where I work, where to go was never something that we considered, never something that we did. And you now have to look at it long term. Is this something that we're going to be doing for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years? Is this something that we can now build into our business and run more efficiently? And then looking at the internal side of innovation during this pandemic is how we're taking care of our staff. Whereas, hopefully everybody's taking care of their staff before, but now with limited hours, in Chicago, you can't sell alcohol past a certain time. How do we make sure that people are still able to get their shifts, still able to get that creative outlets, still able to R&D, still able to evolve a bar program while you're working under, pretty strict restrictions? Like, we don't spend money on alcohol like we used to. We have to kind of look at what can we repurpose, what can we reuse, what do we have, and how can we maybe upcycle a little bit, where we never really looked at that kind of stuff before. So it's funny that innovation is now becoming a means for survival, and how we kind of look at adapting and surviving.
And, and I think too, with something like to-go cocktails, a lot of innovation and technique. How many hours did we all spend learning how to shake a daiquiri so that it was perfect to drink within like 30 seconds? And now all of a sudden there's this whole genre of drink even that we're like, okay, well, what's going to last, the 20-minute bike ride or Uber ride to somebody's house, and then however long, they sit it. So it's like all those things that we used to think of about bartenders, they still apply, like temperature, dilution, maybe carbonation, all of these things, but in a much different capacity. So I'm excited on that front to see who comes up with what. There's bound to be some genius stuff to come up within the next few months, because like you said, Alexis, like survival mode, and
I was thinking about it the other day. It was quite funny because obviously we're all doing to-go drinks. So I was just thinking that New Orleans has been ahead of the curve for a very long time. They've been innovating the takeaway to-go for years, and now we're all starting to adapt it and innovate it in our own way. So
yeah, frozen Irish coffees all around.
Yeah.
And that's a very good point, because actually as an industry, and I think that's true for every industry, we're always going through phases and ups and downs, and we're looking for the next big thing, and trends and mods come and go, right? So on the one hand, innovation really is a means to survive, not just because of the current challenges that we're facing, but in a bigger picture, right? Yet we all worked in environments that are highly driven by innovation and new disruptive ideas. Yet we also all worked in companies, in bars, where it's about keeping a consistent and rather timeless path of continuity, right? How do we find that very fine balance between constantly looking for the new and the innovative, yet keeping that consistent profile and a certain timeless ease?
I feel like a lot of that has to do with the concept of your different venue. Even if like drinks and menus and techniques evolve, the feel of your space, I think still feels, or the feel of your service still keeps constant. it's that kind of emotional thing that keeps classic. But obviously, products are always going to change and evolve. I mean, look at the last 5-10 years, how many new spirits and new products there are even available to work with, and new techniques. But one thing I've gotten from working with Don and Dave is this sort of aspect of finding what they don't like and things that they really like. And I think that has always inspired taking things that are classic, but finding ways to evolve them, as Alexis said. If a lot of the drinks on our menu really have pretty classic flavors, there's nothing in there that would be, quote unquote weird or foreign. People kind of look and they go, oh, okay, well, there's like waffles and bourbon, or there's like carbonated Paloma with, mineral water, but it's the ideas that kind of keep evolving.
I like that point that she made, and it kind of reminds me of keeping a bar program that's unpretentious and accessible to really anybody. You want to be the home-based bar, maybe for the neighbors. People travel, tourists come into town, and they want to frequent your bar as well. So I really like the idea of nothing weird or outlandish in the sense that it turns people off, but kind of giving people something familiar to look forward to. Maybe your technique is a little bit something that they've never heard of, but like she said, bourbon and waffles, like who doesn't know what that is? But, I think I watched them extract the waffle flavor from the bourbon, and that was a little outlandish, behind the scenes. But I also think that like trying to keep a program classic, but moving forward also relies on many different talents being a part of that creation process, not just having it be one person or just the beverage director, but also employing, your hourly employees to help you out, or to give you ideas, or to give you a second and third set of eyes, because maybe what I like and what I consider to be balanced and perfect actually isn't. And it takes a few voices to say like it needs more acid, or it needs more sugar, or maybe that should be stirred and not shaken. All of these things are very valuable. And if you're going to keep moving forward, I think you need to keep thinking of the different voices that are going to apply to what you're creating in a way.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, I think finding a balance, for me, I think you have to separate yourself, individual, from the bar. So for me as an individual, I think always seek new techniques, because, for you personally, for your personal games, I think understanding as many techniques as possible is only going to benefit you and further your knowledge. But it doesn't necessarily mean you have to force everything you learn to your bar. You have to be true to the USP, the concept of it. And also you have to remember, like, for example, the past few years, milk punches have been coming back to the forefront, and they're really popular. But in 5 years' time, this, technique isn't going to depreciate in deliciousness, So I think just because something is old doesn't mean it's not still the right thing to use. It's still just as delicious as it was 5 years ago. So don't force on innovation. I think for me, learn as much as you can, but be true to your bar's USP, and also just things don't necessarily expire, so I think having a good mix of new and old is important to bars, definitely for mine anyway.
Absolutely.
I love that idea of trial and error, kind of like some things are going to work out the first time, some things are going to take many iterations, and at a certain point sometimes you have to say like, this isn't going to work out for me right now, like let me put this on the side. And I don't think I ever really discard ideas completely. Like I kind of put them in my phone, or I write it down and I put it away for a while, because sometimes it just takes a couple weeks, or coming at it with a fresh set of eyes for yourself to be like, here's what I missed on this, here's how I can push this forward and make it good. So I like the idea of trial and error and incorporating that into innovation, is that sometimes you got to have a couple goes and sometimes you just got to put it on hold.
Yeah. And like that, I think too, putting the intention behind like, why are you using this new technique? Like having a clear mindset of the goal. Dave created the Spinzall, which is basically a centrifuge that is the size of a food processor. So we use a lot of clarified, whether like citrus or fruits, And we used to get a lot of young bartenders that would come in and be like, oh, well, I made a completely clear pina colada. And, and we would say, okay, why? Because it's clear, and that's cool and that's fun, but the reason why we clarify all of our citrus carbonated cocktails is because CO2 is going to dissolve better into a liquid than anything with particulates. So it's all those different techniques that you learn and you gain, and the voices, it's like some things are going to work, some things aren't going to work. But like Iain said, the more you can know, the more you have in your wheelhouse to say, okay, what goal am I trying to achieve, or what problem am I trying to solve, and then put intent behind it, versus just what's different, I think it's more meaniful.
Yeah, exactly. There could be many types of clarification, freeze clarification, using agar stuff. But then if you have so many similar things that create a similar end product, again, it's as managers and owners, we look at the time, the efficiency, the cost. These also have to be a factor into these cool techniques as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think these are wonderful points because these are some hands-on examples for all the people watching, right, on how to really make innovation part of your business model and your program. And I particularly love the fact that it's not about being different or trying to be different just for the sake of doing so, but always putting the right intent and the question why behind that in order to bring out the real value of that idea that you had in the first place, right? And I also guess, depending on what it is that you're looking for, what you're trying to achieve, there's different forms of value and different ROIs in regards to innovation. Would you agree?
Mm-hmm.
Definitely.
What could be some of those different values and value propositions that you could get out of the idea of innovating over and over again?
I think that, the best kind of measure of, ROI of innovation is you look at how our industry has grown and expanded over a really relatively short amount of time. This millennium really, is kind of where we've seen things really explode. So 20 years, it's not that much time. And I think that that's because it's just been a very inspiring period in cocktails life, because there's a lot of creative thinking going on. And so I think if you want to look at, what's the benefit of all of this, it's to see how far reaching the cocktail industry has become. And I think it's because it hasn't just stayed at the Manhattan, the daiquiri, the gimlet, the martini. We've expanded and grown it to mean more and more creative things to connect with more and more people.
And looking at innovation over and over again, I know that we kind of talked about also looking at your return on investment is maybe staying true to your business model, what your original intent was when you opened, what kind of bar you have, what kind of cocktails you're serving, and making sure that you don't alienate your clientele and or your staff, because you can come into, when I first stepped foot into aviary, it was very intimidating for me because there's no actual bar. You walk in and you're like, I'm going to pull up a seat at the bar, but oh wait, I can't. It's behind a cage, it's in a kitchen, and everybody, looks like they're in this process of making these drinks, and it's very robotic. And so for me, that was a little bit scary. And then you step in and you start to understand and learn what the innovation is happening and how this bar is moving forward. And it becomes second nature to you. And all of a sudden, when you're putting things together and you're making things, you realize that you are actually kind of recreating over and over and over again, but you're within this boundary that you've given yourself, which is that you're trying to fit this model, and you understand that this is what people are looking for when they come in here. And it's crazy to see the deviation, from, the guest reaction. If you have a cocktail that you put on that, innovation can be flavored ice. It can be, these cool forced carbonations as clarification. But it can also be barrel aging something. And so you have guests that come in and you have this 42-month barrel aged awesome cocktail that comes in a glass, and all they really want is the thing that is 15 different colors and comes with smoke. And so it's really weird to see that disparity between your clientele, and you start to realize that you have to kind of figure out how this simple thing here, which is innovative, meets in the middle somewhere where people are expecting a certain thing from you, because you don't want to drive your business away. And you also don't want to drive away the potential people that are going to come in to learn from you because they see that you do this thing. They want to learn about how your bar program runs.
Yeah, I think we're very fortunate at Existing Conditions, Aviary, Hada and Sons, and so many other bars where we're kind of known for kind of pushing the boundaries and cocktails in our menu. So our general clientele are demanding and expecting that. But exactly as we've all been saying there, it's like if you have some nice old school bar that's known for its great rotational beer program, and then suddenly you take that away for no reason apart from your own self-interest, and you replace it with some house rotational kombucha ferment program, it's not necessarily going to be a success for you. So yeah, again, I think even more now we have to really listen to our clientele, because to have our bars busy is again going back to survival. But yeah, you have to stick true to that USP, and I guess also the return of investment is also learning about the time efficiency, cost, and all these things as well. We want to wow our customers, but if I'm trying to extract the 0.5% fat content of a pea, it's not necessarily going to be good for me to keep up with the supply and demand of the busy nature, high volume nature of Panda and Sons. So yeah, I think again, touching back on learn as many new techniques for yourself. I think that's amazing. Do it, don't stop, but don't let your ego come in the way of making the bar a success.
And I think too, something I loved that we talked about the other day was, discussing innovation as culture, return of investment, what's the longevity of your staff? How many people have passed through your venue that have then gone on to lead their own venues? And it's, innovation really, as we've discussed, it's problem solving, and it's about empowering people to find their own solutions. So I think, that's definitely an aspect of return of investment, is how much like good or influence have we been able to share, and be shared with us. I love that now we have this global community, where really we can influence each other from across the world. And that to me is the greatest kind of gift of innovation, is just inspiring other people to take on their own perspective and their own choices and their own processes. And it's, rising tide helps all boats, that kind of a thing.
Yeah, you talked about culture and community, and I think we talked about this briefly before too, which is passing it on to the community doesn't just mean like me, myself, I'm giving something back, but it extends to the people that work for you and what they learn from you, and then how they either take that and apply it while they're at work, or when they leave, they go off and they go do something great, which is in turn then giving back to the community as well, because they're able to take their talents to a different location or maybe a different place and kind of continue to spider web out, I don't want to call them good vibes, but they're out there positively teaching and training other people as well. And so the innovation doesn't just stop with putting a new cocktail on the menu. The innovation keeps going with new bartenders and younger generations that are continuing to then take what they learned from you and evolve that to be even better. And you kind of see this network of this thing started here, and now 10 years later it's over here, but look at how many people it's reached. So I think that's really awesome that you touched on that, AK, because it's kind of one of the things that the bar community does really well, is we have this amazing network of people that can keep teaching and growing.
Yeah, and I think that was so nice when we all discussed that, and we all were kind of on the same page with it. Obviously we've been touching at the beginning of this section about, cocktail innovation, but yeah, it's so important, the way to innovate or lead management and, teach all your, people that come through, because they don't last forever, as we've said, and they move on. So we want to make sure they're leaving with these great principles, and that's a good return on investment, that they've left with these good kind of building blocks or core values to move on. And as I said, spider's web, I call it family tree, same thing. When they'll knock on effects, they'll teach someone else. And that's why we've kind of developed recently, kind of just finished actually last week, this kind of creative space to be able to educate our staff. And, again, it's open to the wider cocktail community as well. But, on the days off they want to really learn, and I'm in there most days, I can really teach them, the right way to do trial and error, research and development. So then we have lots more people more capable of innovating in many different ways.
It's a wonderful point, empowering your staff, empowering the people around you, and making innovation a cultural element really within the industry. Now, I'm curious, when you all look back at your own path within the industry, at your own careers over the last years and decades, when did you really feel like, what were some of the most stellar examples of management or some of your coworkers enabling you and empowering you to be the best at what you can do, and empower you to be most innovative and looking forward into a prosperous future?
I think the first time I really took advantage of the sort of the global network that we have available to us as bartenders was the CAP program. It was at Tails. We even in your own bar, you kind of have your own little bubble. And even at the time I was at PDT, it's a very global bar. You're still stuck in a very small space with a very small group of people. And I think it was when I started working with the CAP program. Don said something to me about, the CAP program is great because it's like in a lot of ways not real life. So you can kind of figure out how to interact and work with people and how to lead and how to follow in ways that in my own bar, if I say something or make a mistake, that stays with me because I'm in and around that staff. And the CAP family was sort of this removed family that it's a little more temporary. So it kind of enabled me to sort of, I don't want to say experiment, but I guess like trial and error, like what are the best ways to be a good leader? And you had so many examples around you and so many great examples of people working as a team and listening to direction. And I think that was sort of where it started to click for me of, how do you do this thing? How do you motivate a group of people beyond just the 5 or 10 you're with in a shift?
100% agree with that. Like AK, I've been lucky enough to be a part of the CAP program, and I'm a very anxious human. I am large groups of people that I don't know. I just want to go home and read a book. That's just the kind of person I am. And so being put into this world where everybody's a stranger except for maybe one person, and they purposely divide you up from the people that you might know in your market. No, you're going to spend a week away from everybody in Chicago and you're going to be with these people. You were able to really kind of zero in on the different styles of leadership that everyone had and get new mentors, have somebody see you as a mentor, and you were able to actually really practice a lot of the things that maybe back home you want to put into practice. And like she said, you're not sure if this is going to be the right method to approach people back home. And you can kind of really be able to do a lot of trial and error with people that are not going to judge you for making the mistakes the same way that maybe you do in your bar program back home. And as somebody who also used to be very impatient, as I was coming up through the ranks of leadership where I work, I had a hot temper. I was surrounded by chefs who wanted to yell and scream. And so I kind of was built into this culture of, if you're not loud and you're not direct and you're not aggressive, then you're not getting your points across. The CAP program was really, it helped me dial back what was wrong with how I was approaching these different situations, and then really dial in on the more effective ways to lead a team back home. And it's interesting to see how I've progressed since then, because now for me, leadership is not about micromanaging and reprimanding. It's a little bit more about building culture, teaching other people the things that I know and teaching them how to innovate. And then, in a sense, kind of innovating yourself from the inside out and helping yourself, I guess, level up and become a better leader that way. I'm very hands-on when it comes to teaching, but hands-off when it comes to, I don't like to micromanage anymore. It's kind of a stressful thing. So I feel like I found a good zen with all of that stuff.
That was a good line, the innovating from the inside out.
To be honest, for me, actually, the bar industry as a whole, because the first bar job I had was at the Voodoo Rooms back in 2007, and I was surrounded by an amazing group. At the time, it was one of the best teams in the world, definitely Europe. You had like Ryan Chetty, the late Ben Carlotto, Shervin Shabaskani, many others, great people. And prior to that, I hated work. I think I was fired from 3 jobs before then. I just didn't really take it seriously because it didn't excite me. And then when I was really captivated by bar, I love history and art, and suddenly I realized, the deep history of booze and, the creative license you can do to make cocktails. And also the owners I've worked for, Brendan, Denny and Kyle's, were just so kind and just willing, they're treating you like a human being, not a number. And if you made a mistake, it's not the end of the world, because if you are trying, they understand that. So I learned a lot of great things from bar industry. I realized you can actually have fun while taking your job seriously. Doesn't have to just be a job. So yeah, I guess that for me was what kind of really got me loving it. And to be honest, those kind of core values have I've evolved, or I guess innovated it since, like looking after my staff, treating them as friends, but obviously, there's still a fine line between being, the boss but friend. But it's a good one to do a tightrope balance with. And just looking after people. I think from then, just being appreciative of how I was looked on. I guess touching on what we talked about before, it's like I'm just passing that on with a slight evolution to my staff.
Iain, going right back to you, you briefly mentioned switching, that technique that you've come up with, and you've been very successful implementing that into your bar programs over the last couple of months and sort of 2 years almost, I guess. If you take that as an example, how do you see the efficiency element in your day-to-day operations, and where and how do you think innovation could either challenge or change your efficiency at the bar, for better or for worse?
Yeah, I was looking at other great techniques, and I guess, it was this chance of I love bartending, so bar nerds, but also bar owner. So I guess these kind of 2 values that I'm looking from a business perspective and also from just a cocktail perspective. I researched a lot, again, researching all sorts of things. So I guess going back to, there's an old beer called Eisbock, you can't find it around the world, but it came from Germany. And this is where historically they'd leave the beer out in the cold winter's night, and it would freeze the water, over a certain amount of time, and they'd siphon off the beer that was still liquid, so therefore creating a stronger beer. So I liked the idea of that, and I started playing around with that, and I started just to understand it. But then I started tasting the water and realizing there's a lot of flavor leaving. So then I was like, well, if that can leave, why can't I bring a new flavor in? And so that's kind of the nutshell of switching. But one thing I've really enjoyed was basically, yes, it's a cool technique, or I guess I'm slightly biased because I created it, but it's also very efficient, because basically what you need, there's different types of things, I know, Alexis, you've been using like a super freezer, the ones that really cool it down, fan operated, which is, didn't think about it, and actually I think that's probably maybe a lot more quicker way of doing it actually. But for us, we use it's basically a glorified chest freezer. They're called like ultra freezers. And the difference between that and the normal chest freezer is the thicker insulation and a stronger compressor. So you can really batch bulk with it. You can be creating liters and liters of it. So it's not like a road fat where, you have to have many, which costs a lot, and it's a slow yield. So we can make loads, and, we designed it because Panda & Sons is so high volume. And it's also not labor intensive. You put it in, you just keep checking on it now and then, and it works around your time schedule. You don't have to work towards its time schedule, which again, for all of us being so busy, is a plus. And the efficiency, energy usage is low. And also what we found now and we're trialing is it's kind of a closed loop one as well. So Jono, who works with me, he had this idea with the water, and we realized it's not just water, there's still traces of alcohol in there. And then what we do now is we're carbonating that to make kind of highballs. So we're actually growing the GP from the bottle of spirits or liquor and creating more value out of it as well. And one thing that excites me so much about switching is, yes, I thought of it, but I've not thought of everything. So it's so exciting, when even chatting to Alexis so much about it and hearing what she was wanting to do was exciting for me, because it's, again, passing on this baton to everyone else to be creative and doing things for the first time with switching that I've not done. And I'm learning from other people now about the technique, which is great. And it just shows how amazing and how forward thinking our industry is.
It's so cool. Yeah,
Alexis,
sorry, go ahead, Reinhard.
Alexis, I just wanted to briefly touch bases with you on that as well. Like, how does that feel for you to sort of take that idea of switching and then work with it in your own way and sort of kind of piggyback it with Iain and exchange some ideas across the pond with that?
For me, it was really exciting because I am not naturally inclined to think. I don't think when it comes to cocktails about innovation that way, kind of creating a whole new thing. I don't know if I've been in this industry long enough to be confident enough to do that. So I feel like still learning so much, and to be able to see something like that, be excited about it, and then be able to reach out to somebody and be like, how are you doing this? What's going on? Because like you said, our equipment that we have is much different. So we've had to alter a few things, and the freezer that he was talking about, the blast freezer, it gets down to negative 40 degrees Celsius and freezes things like nobody's business in 30 minutes. And so we were running into problems where it was too efficient and it was freezing everything to the point where we couldn't work with anything, or we would use high proof alcohol and it wouldn't freeze enough. So we had to I employed one of my guys, Luis, to help me out. And I was like, we need to figure this out. We need to make this happen. And it became a little bit of an obsession. And I was like, look at these. This is an image of what he's doing here, his photos. It's step by step. Like, what do we do on our ends to make it, as consistent as what they're doing? And we ended up looking at adding water and changing maybe the structure of how this item was freezing so that we could use our equipment by making a granita of sorts and then running it through like a cheesecloth like you would do a freeze clarification. And so in encountering our own problems, I feel like we were able to figure out a way that worked best for us. And then friends would come in and we would serve them, like a daiquiri and a switch daiquiri. And they're like, whoa, what is this? And I was like, oh my God, it's this cool thing that, we learned from, a buddy who's in Scotland. And then it started to trickle down into the staff where they were like, hey, what's this switched bourbon in the low boy? Like, what is this? Can you talk about this? Can I taste that? And then they wanted to know more about it and they wanted to see how we were working on this project. And so people just started gravitating towards this new technique. They were really inspired. They were super excited. And I feel like after you see the same equipment every single day and you're force carbonating and you're distilling and you're centrifuging, there's a point in time where you maybe become a little bit jaded by it. And so you start to see it as everyday and it's regular. And while everybody else is like, that's super cool, you start to be like, it's work. It's the same thing I do every day. And so to introduce a new technique that was innovative and used our equipment and repurposed what we were doing was super exciting for them because they were like, I have this new fresh thing to latch on to. So props to Iain for coming up with this thing and to watch it kind of grow in our bar home, here in Chicago was really awesome.
That's so cool, and it's like, yeah, like I remember the first time I learned about a rotovap and, figuring out, oh, well, the flavor you're going to get from a cooked strawberry that's distilled versus a rotovap strawberry is totally different. It's creating that mindset, that constant mindset of questioning what is the norm, and then finding new ways to come up with something different. And you're still working with the strawberry, but the way that you can manipulate that is a million different ways. So it's really amazing.
Yeah, we're doing the same thing. So in terms of the same ingredients, so we're starting to, I guess, kind of looking at freezing in a different way. So I guess this kind of touches on, research and development. So I guess what opened my eyes to finding new things was looking at cooking techniques. So for example, you reduce something by heat, you get a concentrated flavor, or you use a dehydrator to get rid of the moisture to have something that'll last a long time. And, I guess mostly for garnishes, it looks cool. So I started questioning this process, like what's the end goal from different varieties, of cooking techniques. And I said, well, can I do it the opposite way through freezing? So currently talking about, like you're saying, AK, about strawberries tasting different. The rotovap, we're doing the same kind of thing with freeze drying now. We're really trialing and seeing such amazing results by, when you use for example, evaporator, you lose all the moisture, but it cooks it. So, but now we're finding we can take all the moisture out with a freeze dryer. So same goal, but the opposite way. But it's not cooking it; it's keeping it intact and keeping the flavor right. And even touching, Alexis, on how you've evolved it with the blast freezer. Then I had this idea about switching recently, and I'm kind of thinking about like flash switching. So we're trialing now once I can start getting a easier access to dry ice. But if we can calculate the temperature of that and to mass, we can theoretically pour in the right amount of dry ice to freeze it accurately. So we're trying to think of that, and that could take minutes, that could be quite exciting. So again, we're looking at evolving, switching, again, blast freezer, but now we're also looking at using dry ice to see if we can do it so people don't have to have a piece of equipment. They could actually buy dry ice and check the temperature, see how much is depleted, work out the mass, a bit of mass involved, but theoretically, they should be able to do switching with dry ice as well. So yeah, that's another evolution of it as well. So. Yeah.
This brings up a really interesting point, and in talking to one of our old staff members a few weeks back, she lives in Norway now. Her name is Alyssa, and she went from the bar kitchen that we have with all the equipment to the bar she works at now, literally having no equipment. And once you find out that you can clarify things or ferment things or distill, and they have certain properties that you like to use, as like we said earlier, with intent, it's hard to move away from that sometimes. And so she had to retrain herself how to do these things without the equipment. And that to me was incredibly exciting, because like you say, the home user using the dry ice to do this technique, what are ways in which we can move our industry forward for people that don't have access to these types of things? Because maybe you don't have a centrifuge, but the Spinzall is a very consistent way to then clarify or do what a centrifuge does, because we have a medical grade centrifuge that you throw the buckets in and it does the work for you. You don't have to be there to do anything. But how would you do this at home? Or how would you look at homogenizing two liquids that don't want to go together at home? And so her talking about this was really inspiring, because I was like, nobody ever thinks about that. Nobody ever thinks about now not having this equipment, or to the idea that you're going to repurpose something or figure out how to use your waste, like the rotary evaporator. You have the distillation, and then you have all this concentrate. Well, can that concentrate be then used for something? Can you use the strawberry concentrate and make a jam? What can you do with it? And so all of these innovations and questions then have new questions that you start asking yourself, and it just becomes like this, this chain of what if, what can I keep doing? And I think that that's really incredible. And to see these people that are always questioning is also, super exciting.
Alexis, that's already a perfect intro to the next question that I wanted to ask all of you. And since we're sort of getting close towards the end of our session, give us some of your best practices, some guidances, and some creative advice, Alexis, like you did with Keep on Questioning. What would be some of your thoughts on that, and some of the best practices that you would like to share with us?
I feel like, just the mentality of it sounds cliche, but you can never stop learning, and there's and don't feel limited by what resources you have or what tools you have. I think whether you're a manager watching this or a bartender watching this, I think the beauty of innovation is that it comes from yourself. So, if you feel like you're in a situation where maybe your management isn't innovative, don't let that stop you from finding your community that pushes you and inspires you. And that's really, I think, how all of us have found a way to get to where we are, and where we hope to keep going is just by expanding that network. Yeah. use your surroundings, I guess.
And I guess jumping off of that, I always kind of live with this idea that if you are walking into work and you're no longer learning, it might be time to take that next step to kind of find your next challenge. And with that, people that are working under us or with us, or people that we're working for, you have to think about innovation as starting with you. It can't start with somebody else. It has to start with the questions that you're asking, because then you can really start to challenge the ideas. Don't be afraid to change old practices. Just because it works well doesn't mean that it can't be changed to work even better. And then looking at building your bar to be a home for everyone, because the people that walk in the back door and say, I can't wait to start my shift, I'm so excited to be here, are the ones that really start to then change the culture, start to evolve, start to innovate, and start to really push things to the next level. Because you always talk about the next generation, and that doesn't just go for your mom and your dad and I'm their daughter. It goes for our bar industry as well. You want to train the next generation to keep moving forward and to keep evolving positively. So, ask the questions and remember that innovation starts with you.
Yeah, I think I agree with all of you guys. Always question things. That doesn't mean it's not a negative thing. Like, you have to do it out loud or ask the person, but why is it done this way? And or example, or why isn't it done this way? And patience is very important. I think you touched on that, Alexis. Like, make sure you've learned everything you can from a venue before you move on. I think I see a lot more people being a lot more impatient now. Don't get me wrong, there's so many more bars opening, left, right, and centre. Choice is at its peak right now. There's maybe not during lockdown, but prior to that, there's so many places you can choose from to move, jump ship. But be honest, obviously you want to earn more money over time, but the value of knowledge is so important. And just because you moved somewhere to become a supervisor or your first manager position, are you going to learn anything from that move? So I think it's always important to have that balance between knowledge and financial gains towards your next career moves as well. I think that's very important, because that knowledge will be the long-term benefit, as opposed to sometimes that financial move is maybe sometimes a short-term benefit. And I guess also to terms of like innovating, I like to say that there's rules, but there is no rules. So there's no rules in innovation. You can don't think there's parameters. Just open your eyes, question things, do it, but have the rules to achieve it. So, for example, learning proper research and development in terms of trial and error. Don't just throw everything together and not understand why it didn't work, or just disregard it. Again, patience comes in. Change things one at a time so you really understand what each component is doing. I guess I'm talking more specifically on, techniques. So having a really rigid rules on how you do the trial and error But to what you're achieving, there's no rules. So there's rules to achieve it, but don't be held back thinking there's parameters to what you can achieve.
I like the rules within what you're trying to do, because I've definitely watched some people like fly by the seat of their pants and almost blow stuff up, and I'm just like, good to have rules.
Yeah.
To do the research first before you turn that thing on. So I really appreciate that.
Sure.
And I think too, it's like there's so much that's like you just have to remove your ego from it. You know, if you're trying to innovate, it's about results. You know, and if more people focused, I think, on results rather than appearances or feeling right or wrong about this, then we would achieve more results. So it's taking things objectively and taking things one day at a time, and there's never a source that you can't learn from or a tool that you can't figure out how to use differently or better.
Yeah, and I think that's it. Like there's two parts of it as well. I guess, again, talking more about cocktail techniques. So there's, obviously reading a recipe or a step-by-step guide of how to do it is one thing, so you can do it. But it's also very important to understand why it's being done this way, or what is the goal. Because I find so many bartenders, and we've had a few through our bars in time, where they can, I'm going to do this technique for this cocktail. We're like, but why? And they have no idea. So scratch the surface, understand how to do it, but also understand why it's done that way, or what's the pros and cons of certain things you learn as well. Like really, really understand that.
And I think that helps to not alienate your guests too. Like if a guest comes in, guests are probably going to ask that question too. Well, why did you put this on the menu? And if there is some kind of genuine intent behind it, that comes across, with how it translates to somebody who's consuming it.
And then I was going to add on to not really be afraid. Don't be afraid to foster the ideas of other people. So if you have somebody that comes to you with I want to do this thing, and you say, well, why? And, it plays out. Maybe you didn't think of it, and that's fine. But the chances of them having learned that from their environment around them, that's very high, which is a compliment to the person they're coming to ask, can we do this thing? And don't be afraid to foster that growth and to walk them through step by step if they need that person there for support, and teach them how to use the equipment, or show them where they might be messing up when they don't get it right the first few times. Because at the end of the day, that kind of collaboration or that teamwork aspect, it builds, as AK said, a much stronger end product than it would have been if one person struggled through it by themselves. You might end up with something mediocre instead of ending up with something that is truly great.
Yeah, absolutely. It's never a solo effort. It's always a product of you and the people around you.
Which ultimately brings us back full circle that in the end, innovation is a means of community, us being part of this industry altogether. And I think it's also another reassurance that we truly live in the most wonderful time and era of bartending and the cocktail culture in general, because we've got all the tools, we've got creative and most innovative brains like all of you guys within the industry, and we can truly bounce off ideas of each other. We can share all that. And as an industry, we're very often good at quantifying the hands-on aspects of our daily operations, whether it's the ingredients that we use, whether it's the recipes that we use, or the bath cost. Yet it's much harder to pinpoint sort of the value and the return on invest when it comes to innovation and culture on our bigger means. But if one thing we could hopefully bring across, that spark of innovation being a means of culture and something on a much larger scale, then I think we can really move forward and progress as a community and as an industry as a whole. And with that, I can only thank you guys so much for your contribution that you make to our beloved industry, for all the hard work and effort and all the innovation that you bring to the table and to the bar every single day. And also a huge thank you to Tales of the Cocktail for everything that you do, for giving us the opportunity to be here on this panel, sharing our little seminar with all of you. And hopefully to all of you guys watching this, be open-minded, never stop learning, exploring, and questioning things, and you will take your operations to the next level as well. So thank you very much, AK, Alexis, Iain. It's been a wonderful session, and many thanks for your contribution and being part of this. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.